Thanks for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and today's guests are Houston, Texas powerhouse couple as realtors, Vic and Karishma Asrani. Vic and Karishma work in the Keller Williams organization, and their group is called the Asrani Group. Working together, they happen to be married, but this can apply to any team working together, how you do that, how you divvy up responsibilities. And then we'll also talk about how life works when things go wrong, when things don't quite work the way you thought they were. And as a married couple working in a situation like that, all of a sudden that magnifies. So they're going to talk about that. Some other things that you'll hear is both Vic and Karishma are immigrants. They both came from India and have only been in America for about 20 some odd years. And so what's that experience like? What were some of the struggles as they started up? And we're going to talk about one of my favorite books, The Immigrant Edge by Brian Buffani, who is a thought leader in our real estate industry. So without further ado, enjoy this episode of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. Thanks, everyone. Designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and today's guests are a powerhouse couple, both in business and in their marriage. I've got with me a couple of friends. We've got Karishma and Vic Asrani. Say hello to our audience.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
So they are with the Keller Williams organization. Specifically, their team name is called the Asrani Group, and their tagline is "Your Partners in Real Estate." One of the things that I was speaking with both Vic and Karishma about when we started this podcast interview process is, let's talk about your marriage. Let's talk about working together and honestly how you succeeded to stay married and also be successful in business together. And so Vic or Karishma, however you want to get started, let's talk about the process of getting professional coaching to succeed as a married couple in the real estate industry. And then let's also talk about maybe that gap period of how long you've been married versus when you started working together.
So we've been married for close to 15 years. Karishma was in the business for about 10 years before I joined her. She was thankfully very patient with convincing me slowly over time, this business is good, it's worth it, and bring me from a steady corporate job environment and sort of lifestyle that I was used to this world. 5 years, knock on wood, have been very successful, very pleasant, great to work with. And we used a business coach to help us with that.
Well, I was keen on having Vic join me because of his background. He's an architect. He's built homes for 10 years. He knew A to Z of construction. I mean, how amazing is it that I can walk in with a buyer and say, I know exactly what issues are going to arise with this house. You know, that was like a benefit you could bring to your client. And I was like, you got to join me. Well, it took me only 10 years to convince him, but I did.
Well, I love that. It's so funny. Sometimes, anybody can be a little bit slow to move, but us guys, we just tend to, take the advice of our wife maybe after several years of prompting. And at the same time, Vic, I completely understand it. Having a great steady income, especially if your wife is working in a commission sales situation, certainly a great yin and yang where you've got the steady and she's got maybe the upside of being in her own business. So that 10-year period, she's convincing you, she's also succeeding. What I'd love to do is just kind of get to the start of that. Karishma, you had mentioned to me that you came to this country in 2004 and pretty quickly decided to be in real estate. So what was that like being both a foreigner, trying to learn how things worked in America, but then also learning this brand new industry as well?
Yeah, so I moved in '04 and it was a big culture shock for me, to be honest. It was, I was as excited I was to move to America. Everybody wants to come to America. I was like, wow, I'm getting to go there. I was super excited. But when I got here, The first 3 months was very hard, just getting adjusted to the lifestyle here, which is so different back home. And I had my architecture degree from India. And so I knew I wanted to do something related to real estate. And Vic actually was like, okay, why don't you get your real estate license? And I remember back then we didn't even have the money for me to get my license. I actually worked at a UPS store. It was $600 to get your license at that time. As soon as I hit the $600 income, I went and took my test and I was like, I'm going to get into real estate. So that's how I got in. And I was 24. I was young. I didn't have anything to lose. I was like, I'm going to try it. If I don't like it, I can always get back into architecture, work with an architect. But I never looked back. I loved it, loved every minute of it. It was quite hard in the beginning, not knowing how to drive, not knowing the subdivisions, not knowing anything, not knowing, the schools, the neighborhoods, the restaurants. But over time, you learn, you keep learning. And, so it took me about 6 to 8 months to be able to drive by myself to show a home, not drag Vic with me, and be able to drive without actually looking at a key map, having to learn everything. I still remember before meeting a client, I would look at the key map. I would try to memorize the route from the office to the house so that I don't look at a map when I'm taking them in the car. And, but now I'm glad I did that, because that time, GPS was not like the big thing. But I'm glad I did that, because now I can drive without the GPS anywhere. You name the street, I know exactly where it is.
Well, and one of the things that I learned about you from meeting with you and then also speaking with you right before we started recording is that Vic would drive you because you didn't have a driver's license. And so it was, that was a situation that would be quite interesting for a real estate agent. Imagine that before the days of Uber, there was Vic.
Exactly.
And you know what's funny? I would take the call, like I would do property time. I would get a call and they'd be like, we want to see this house. I'd be like, can you see it after 6 o'clock? Because he was working till 5:30, right? He had that corporate job. So I would wait for him to come home. I'd be like, you need to take me here. I need to show this house.
Oh, the own personal chauffeur. I love it. And so I got my start in real estate in 2004, coincidentally. And yeah, you're right. GPS didn't exist. I remember and I was working as an assistant for a powerhouse team. Every appointment that we'd have, I'd have to print out the MapQuest. I would have to go online, the internet existed. I'd have to go print out the MapQuest, and that was part of the pre-appointment packet. We also had, we had the book, the MapSco book, or whatever the company was, the book that was in the back of your car. And if you're doing a new subdivision, that subdivision didn't exist in the book, so it was quite an adventure. We're already dating ourselves, right? So Vic, I'd love to hear from your perspective, being outside looking in. Karishma's succeeding. She's doing very well. She was recognized as a 30 under 30, as was I in different years. And that is a huge accolade nationally at a young age. And so you enter into the business about 5 years ago, and you've got, very naturally being an architect, and Karishma is too, you've got this engineering mindset, this precision mindset. What are some of the things that you did to improve the business? But then also, how did you do it in such a way that you were able to amplify each other's efforts instead of maybe bicker with each other, which sometimes couples can do?
Right. So pretty soon, we decided that we were going to separate the business into specific functions, right? Things that she's good at, she will continue to do in any way that we can make it more efficient. We did that. So with the help of the business coach, basically I took over the finance tracking side of things, as well as the operation side of things, getting it from having process and systems for every kind of client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, with a very consistent checklist that was clear to everybody. Karishma actually already had a part-time assistant at the time when I had joined her. So we basically trained the assistant more, gave her very specific checklists and duties, and kind of made it more easy for her to also do more while she was with us. That really helped take things to the next level, because now she could focus, and that's what one thing that we also did was primarily she focuses on sellers and I primarily focus on buyers. Because of my previous construction experience, it's one of those things where you walk through a house, tell the client right away, this can be changed, this can be changed for X dollars, this is cost prohibitive to change if you want to make this house work for you. Or this house is a no-go because the stucco is bad or the roof is bad or whatever it is. So I was very efficient at figuring things out for buyers. So I ended up focusing on that. So that helped ease the load, if you will, on both of us, because now you gain more experience on one kind of thing. And then, she focused on sellers, staging, professional pictures, things like that. She got really more efficient. Plus the offloading of everything else that's in the background went to the assistant.
So really, it sounds like a right brain, left brain type of situation,
Right.
Analytical versus maybe a more creative type of situation. So all those things I think make for a great couple, right? And what I have found, and I know this with my wife, Courtney, that opposites attract, and the reason why you're attracted to each other is you naturally possess some things that the other person, they have that you don't, and vice versa. And so there's an old saying that if the two of you are the exact same, one of you is irrelevant. And as a married couple, you want to amplify each other's efforts. And so the other turn of that phrase is, while opposites attract, sometimes opposites can attack. And so how did that work for you in the first maybe year or two as you were learning this new working relationship and having been married for much longer than your working relationship, for those that may be thinking about bringing their spouse or significant other into the business?
So we actually, before Vic joined me, we owned a restaurant together. He had his corporate job. I still did real estate, and we had a restaurant that was just open for lunch. So I thought this is going to be easy. I mean, the restaurant failed miserably. I'll never ever open a restaurant again. That's for sure. In 3 years, we shut down the restaurant. But in my mind, I thought, oh, we did the restaurant together. We can easily work in real estate together. So I didn't think much of it. I was like, this is going to be easy. He's going to join me. I already know what he's good at. But quite honestly, the first year was a disaster. not in the business. Yeah. It was a challenge, but in our marriage, because we didn't have an off button. We were constantly working, like whether we were in the office, whether we were at home, we were in the bedroom, we were in the kitchen, it was constantly work. And we didn't know who's responsible for what. We just started working together. And if something didn't go wrong, I'll be like, I thought you were going to do it. And he was like, I thought you were going to respond to that. And it was not working out at all. We were like, at some point, I know I didn't tell him this, but at some point I'm like, maybe we were better off, with him having the corporate job. Yeah. But then like I said before, the business coach actually broke things down for us. And they said, what are you good at and what are you good at, and separate your duties that way. That way we know, okay, I don't have to worry about this. If something goes wrong, that he's going to manage that. And I can just worry about lead generation, bringing the leads in, networking. That's what I'm good at. So that really helped. But I guess if we didn't have that, it was very hard. I was to the point where, it's better off we don't work together. If we did that, we spoke about that, because I said, if you want to join another team, I was okay with that, because it was getting to a point where our marriage was getting affected, and that's not what we wanted.
Right. A big part of it was when I had my sort of corporate day job, there was pretty much nothing that I would do in her business until she asked me for something specific. There was a very clear boundary line. Once we started working together, we didn't talk about those boundary lines with this business. We kind of overstepped all over the place, but we also didn't realize who's responsible for what.
Right.
That was the big challenge that it took us several months to figure out. And then we got the coach, and then realized, you know what, we need to treat this as if this is my job and this other stuff is your job, rather than all of it my job and all of it your job, and no one's really responsible for anything.
Yeah.
Well, in any good team, whether you're talking about sports or business, I mean, that's what happens. Yes. Someone's going to drop the ball. And if you're, the Houston Astros, who just recently won a World Series a little while back, if there's a pop fly and everyone's thinking that everybody else has got it and no one calls it out, all of a sudden the ball's on the grass and the runners rounding the bases. So I can understand that. And at the same time, it makes a lot of sense that you'd have you'd have to have a professional intervene and slow things down and say, guys, this is a different situation than your marriage. And Vic, I love how you said that you had very clear boundary lines before, even though you didn't really think of them probably as that way. It just, they were established.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because she didn't know what was going on in my office at all, because it didn't concern her. There wasn't something specific she could do. And we didn't have boundary lines at home, right? As a couple, we did everything together. It wasn't a defined, you cook, I clean, you do this. We didn't have that. We shared our duties equally as a couple. So when we became business partners, without realizing it consciously, we just kind of drifted into that kind of thing. But it's not the same thing when dishes don't get done one day versus a client who doesn't get a call one day. It's completely different idea. So that's when the business coach, neutral third party, kind of came in and said, okay, let's talk about where this needs to be to run it like a business.
Yeah, I think one thing he just mentioned struck me. We don't have established duties at home. We don't. It's whoever gets to it does it. It's not like, oh, you need to like cook today and I'm going to cook tomorrow. We cook together, we grocery shop together. If I can't make it to groceries, he would do it by himself, or I would do it. It's not like, oh, this is your job, this is my job.
Right. And there is no list of, you did it 3 times, so I'm going to do it 3 times, or Monday, Wednesday is your day. And we don't have any of that. It needs to get done. Somebody has the time, they get it done. That's it.
Well, and that makes sense, because the last thing anybody wants is a legalistic marriage. And at the same time, in a business, it's a lot harder because there are a lot more maybe gray areas of what to do. In your home, you have the boundary lines of the 4 walls, and maybe you want to do something more, Vic, than Karishma might want to, so you gravitate towards that, but it doesn't mean she's incapable of doing it, and vice versa. So this is really fun, because I love the concept of dividing things up into categories. And that was one of the things your career coach had talked to you about. And we've spoken about this a little bit with right brain and left brain, but let's get really, really tactical. What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis, Karishma, with sellers that Vic would never get into? And then Vic, will talk in a minute about some of the things that you work on. So let's talk about what a day in the life of Karishma looks like in your working relationship as a couple.
Okay, so like you mentioned, I primarily work sellers. So from the time that call comes in to setting up the consultation, now every consultation, whether it's a buyer or a seller, we both go together, because they have to meet the team. They have to understand who all are involved in the team, what happens. And it's just nice to be able to connect with people on a personal level as well. So a consultation is usually both of us. And then I do the walkthrough of the house. I do staging, so definitely, and I'm more into the interior design of architecture, so I like that part of it. So I walk through the home with them, tell them exactly what needs to be done, give them homework, basically putting things away, decluttering and all of that. And I basically call it homework. I'm like, have you done your homework? I treat it that way. And then we go back, we take staging items back into the home, decorate the place, get our professional pictures done. All of this is my responsibility and the admin, because the admin has a checklist for the sellers. So as soon as the call comes in, she schedules the photographers, she schedules when the video is going to be taken. So now we've started doing video tours for every listing of ours. So she schedules all of that. So that's her job. So I go in, we stage, we get the pictures done, put it on the market. And then I keep in touch with the seller every week. So every Monday, I will be in touch with the seller, giving them feedback, what happened during the open house on Sunday, or the feedback from showings before. So I'm with them throughout the process. Now, Vikram does come in when inspections happen. So let's say we get an inspection report and it turns out to be something that's a huge amount and needs to be. So that's when he steps in and he looks at it and he's like, okay, this is not a big deal. This is a big issue. Maybe we can fix it this way. And he's so good. Like, he's built homes, so he can actually like sit there and tell them, this is what it's going to cost you to fix this. And this is what I recommend. So that helps us a lot. So he comes in during inspections, during that part of negotiations, and then we both go for closings. So the consultation and the closing doesn't matter if it's a buyer or a seller, we both are there, to start the deal and then wrap it up.
That's great. And for people that are not a husband-wife team, I don't want you to tune out, because one, you can apply some of these things at home if you're married or you have a significant other. But the other thing you can do is that this works for any team, regardless of whether you're related or not. Any team has to divide and conquer, because otherwise you're just hanging out with each other all day. And so Vic, talk about financial analysis and some of the things that you do to help run the business from an operations standpoint. We talked about obviously contract negotiations, and that would be as you're interfacing with the clients. But from what I understand, you do a lot of the structural financials and analytics of the business, hearkening on your architecture background.
Sure. So I also have an MBA, so that's where a little bit of the finance background comes in. So when we had the business coach, he was like, you really need to step outside of your role as a realtor and treat this more as if it was a proper company and you happen to be employees of it, and you have a CEO, which is your other hat. What do you report to your CEO on how the business operates? So we got a bookkeeper. We had a CPA anyway, but we got a bookkeeper who would help us understand all the categories that work for expenses. We set up target goals of what percentage of our revenues needs to go towards each bucket that you need to spend to run a business, whether it's marketing dollars or admin support or IT related expenses, website, CRM, things like that. So we had these big picture buckets established to say, okay, these are the buckets that we have money that's going out. Are these all within the norm of expectation for the industry? Are we overspending somewhere? Are we underspending somewhere? Because if you're underspending somewhere, maybe you're not getting what you should be getting. Not just a cheap deal, but you're actually getting something that isn't worth it. So you should increase your spending sometimes, targeted. Sometimes you're paying for stuff that isn't worth it. Yeah. So you can cut those expenses. So we kind of reviewed all of that, set that up with a bookkeeper. So on a quarterly basis, at least, we get a P&L that says, here's your inflow, here's your outflow, here are the different categories that are trending the same or what's not trending. Oh, we had a couple of extra events because of how holidays went. So we had more marketing dollars the previous quarter compared to normal. Next quarter, should we continue? Should we expect that it'll be less? Helps with planning, that kind of thing. And of course, then it's more of a put together the structure. We need, so much business. We need so much in terms of clients. We need so many listings at any given time. So we keep lead gen going till we get this target. Okay, should we keep going? Yes, we should keep going with lead gen, because it's always okay to manage with extra business rather than with less business. So those kind of things are where I'm kind of talking to the admin to say, how many transactions we have going? Do you need help with the paperwork? How are things looking there? How's the checklist on every step? Because when you start off with somebody on the new team who is new, you kind of explain to them how the team does things, follow through the checklist, make sure that everybody's on the same page with getting those things done. And then first 3 months or so, walk them through every transaction as they go through, make sure things are getting done in a timely manner, and basically make it as efficient as possible for us.
Yeah. And what I like is as we try new marketing,
yes, lead gen ideas.
Yeah, lead gen ideas. He'll actually come back and say, okay, we spent so much money and this is the return we've seen. So maybe we need to drop this, try doing something else. Because for the longest time, I've been a bit like you, I've been in the business since 2004, and we are so used to a certain way. We were like print media, right? That's how I got my first business. I used to farm a neighborhood. I used to send them postcards every month, knock on doors. That's how I got my business. But now print media is not giving you the return that you would get in 2006 and 2008. Now it's all Facebook leads, Instagram leads, online leads. And that's when Vikram came in. He's like, why are you still doing this print media? He's like, we need to switch, we need to do more of this.
It's one of those things you have to keep revisiting what you're doing to figure out if it's efficient or not efficient.
I love you use the word efficiency, because it's something my wife and I, Courtney, we speak about all the time, is efficiency. And I think for that thinker, that cognitive, that high C on the DISC personality profile That's important, efficiently. Let's not waste time here. And it also provides you with a return on investment. If you're thinking about efficiency, can we do more with less? Can we do more with less money? Can we do more with less time? And I think that's really important that Karishma has you, Vic, to be looking at that, and that you both had the coach really pointing those things out. I work a lot with investors selling apartment buildings in Denver. And one of the things that we go through a lot is their profit and loss statements. And something just as a follow-up to your discussion about looking at the profit and loss quarterly, I would venture, and I know you mentioned this briefly, but I would venture that you're doing comparisons on your profit and loss statement. And just for my own learning, because I'd like to see if it matches with what I do, what are your benchmarks? If you're looking at something from a quarterly basis, are you looking at it at X amount of period of time? And what are those intervals? Because I'd really be interested to see how you kind of look at your business as you get more and more data to compare it to.
Right. See, we have obviously the peak season, spring and summer is busier. The winter is a little slow, fall is a little slow, but we know how it ramps up and how it ramps down. So when we set our really yearly goals, we end up setting them, January through December. That's the idea.
Yeah.
But we know that the peak of the business is going to be smack in the middle of the year. So when we look at our quarterly numbers, we know, hey, we're behind or we're ahead. So, okay, we can keep going. We're doing something right. Or, hey, we're really behind. We need to try something different, or we will be really behind in a slow season, which isn't the right thing you want at all. It's one of those things where if you're behind the first quarter, but you still have the second and the third to catch up, you could tweak a little bit, or you can stay the course and expect that you will be able to catch up. But if you're behind at the end of the third quarter, you know that you've got a long road ahead to try to catch up in the fourth, because it's going to be slow anyway.
And actually, you have the Excel sheet too,
Right.
From 2011 till today, how much the GCI was every month, what the marketing dollars was every month, and it's all on an Excel spreadsheet. Like you open it and you're like, okay, 3 years ago, this is where we are. This is where we are today. It's really cool to look at. I would have never been able to put it together. He did, but it's really nice to look at and analyze that.
Because then you can also go back and say, okay, forget how we did also, right? Were we trending with how the Houston market was doing? Were we just going up with the trend? Like 2009 through 2012, Houston was very slow. For the last couple of years, we started tracking it. So we know, okay, the market was pretty bad, but we did okay.
Yeah.
So when there's a shift in the market, we can go back and look at that and go, okay, what did we do differently in a slow market? Should we revisit those approaches? Where did our clients come from? What kind of clients did we have? Was it mostly buyers? Was it investors? Was it a lot of sellers that were capitalizing at a certain time? Was it the period that they were in their lives, a lot of first-time home buyers? So you track that kind of thing to understand, okay, who's going to be ready at the next batch of customers we should be targeting in the coming year.
And that's valuable for the lead generator. Karishma, that data helps you go into the market with confidence.
Yeah.
And so even though Vic may be the catalyst to making a lot of that happen, and you had mentioned, thank goodness he built the spreadsheet and thank goodness he did that. I feel that same way too. I'm like, man, I wish I was more organized. I wish I just understood these, efficiency models so much easier.
I realized no matter whether you are a detail person or not, sellers love looking at numbers, right? They do. And one of the marketing things that Vic actually helped design was, which I think every realtor should have right now, the percentage of list to sale price that the average realtor gets and what Asrani Group gets. And it was higher. And I was like, that is brilliant.
For the last 3 years, at least 1.5% higher.
Right, compared to the average realtor out there. And then we also had average sold price compared to Asrani Group average sold price. Days on the market it took to sell a house by an average realtor and then Asrani Group in that particular neighborhood that we were farming. So every listing presentation we go to, he prepares that for us. And that really blows the seller's mind. Like, oh, I never even thought of looking at it this way,
That's the
So,
one thing that you are like, okay, it's not me telling you I'm great, I'm going to sell your house. This is our historic performance against an average realtor in this neighborhood.
yeah.
And a 1.5%, it may not sound like a whole lot, but that's real dollars. And every day the sellers are asking, so can you discount the commission? Can you discount the commission? Why should I when I'm getting you more money?
Right.
Absolutely. You are proving the results. And most of the time, people discount themselves because there's a lack of value being transferred. That's typically why we see discount in any industry. And so if you can prove that value, all of a sudden you're not a commodity. You're not like everything else. It is literally a situation where you say, look, we're different. And you still may not hire us, but we charge this rate because we have proven that we get more than the average. And that's going to benefit you, which I think is beautiful. So it's a great example of how the data can fuel the sales, and you need both, right? You know, the data folks need the people to sell it. And then, you know, the folks selling it out there need that data to feel comfortable with, here's the reasoning behind what we're doing. So Karishma, I've got a question for you, because I think based on maybe similar personalities that you might have a very interesting answer to this question. So I have felt personally, and I've seen this in others, that we tend to get bent out of shape when we make a mistake. And I intentionally named the company Calibrate when we started this company a couple of years ago, and the podcast also, because I started to become keenly aware of this word calibrate as thinking of life like a scientist or an engineer that is just simply observing the results and making adjustments. That's all calibration is. And I think that what happens is when things don't go right, when we make a mistake, all of a sudden you get bent out of shape and you say, I'm a failure. You use that F word. And so what are some things that you've done personally to kind of get past that idea that, you know, just because it didn't go the way I wanted to, it wasn't a failure? And specifically, we talked about this earlier with, you know, starting to work together as a married couple, but how does that look for you in your life of kind of getting past that failure and learning how to just live with that?
You're so right, because that is my personality. If something doesn't go right, or I worked on something and the deal didn't go through, I am disappointed. Like disappointed with myself, disappointed with everything around me. That's me. I'll be like, I can't believe I didn't succeed in this. Um, over the years, you learn, right? I mean, it feels really bad. Like that whole weekend, I'm upset. I'm disappointed with myself. And then, you know, you pick up and you start working another deal and it goes smoothly. And then you get this fantastic review from your client and you're like, you know what? Okay, I can do this. Like you pick up and go back. But like you, I'm a perfectionist, right? We have to have everything perfect. Otherwise we feel like we failed. But what was nice was we both are very different. And what's really nice is to have Vic around, and he's just so different. He always looks at the glass half full, right? Always. I'm not that. I'm like, no, I want it to be full. I don't want it to be half full. And he always makes me sit back, relax, and take it easy and say, look at everything else. Look at this, look at that. It's okay. You made a mistake. It's fine. We can move on. We'll make sure you don't repeat it. Just a couple nights ago, we were playing this game, not a game, but Vic is like, tell me 3 things you love about me and tell me 3 things you hate about me. And then he said the same thing for me. And the first thing he mentioned about me is like, I love how you have to get everything right. And I said, you love that? He's like, yes, I do.
For me, it's more of we need a postcard mailed by this weekend. If it's 80% right, I'm done, move on. Because I feel like it's 5 seconds, they're gonna look at it, they're gonna move on, or it's a digital ad, it's gonna show up on their screen, they'll see it for 3 seconds and it's gone.
Okay.
So I'll take it to 80 and I'm ready to go order. Cheese, no, it needs to be 99.9%. So I feel like we help each other to get to maybe 90%.
Yeah.
Then we can hit order or send so that, you know, the business doesn't slow down. But it's not like my standards are lower. I'm just being way too pragmatic about getting it done, whereas she's being way more particular about getting it done right.
Right, right.
Well, I
Like,
love that. And I asked you, Karishma, first because I wanted to hear your response. And then Vic, you remind me a lot of my wife. And one of the things I wanted to make sure is that we didn't edit her response. And at the same time, I love that you talked about the pragmatic and the aesthetic. And that's something that Brian Buffini speaks about a lot in his organization as he coaches real estate clientele, is that typically most good partnerships, most good marriages have someone that's very pragmatic, very results oriented, very, right there, let's get it done, let's make it happen. And then someone who's very aesthetic, who loves to touch and feel everything through life. And so it's what serves you very well. And that's why I asked her to answer first. But I ventured this guess, and you went that way, that Vic often lifts you up when you're feeling most down. And I know for myself, Karishma, that my life tends to look like this. I'm constantly, for those that are listening on iTunes, it's up and down and up and down. And, I'm horrible today and amazing tomorrow. And it's mountaintop valley. And my wife, Courtney, and Vic, I can sense that you're this way. Everything tends to be steady Eddie. She'll get down, of course, but she just kind of just even keeled, and I can sense that about you, which is great as a couple that you found each other, because it works perfectly.
yeah, that's spot on. That's how we are. Like, I'm all up and down. Like, you have the great days, and then you have the days where you're like, I can't believe this happened. But Vic is like, it's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. We'll start over. No big deal. And then you move on. So he's very steady that way.
And let's observe this failure, maybe this moment of failure, as an opportunity to learn. Is, I would think, the other thing that Vic brings to the table is, look, everyone's still alive. The business hasn't shut down. And what can we learn from this? How can we make this more efficient? How can we dial this down and bring this up? And so I love that. I love that about the pragmatic.
Right. Because a lot of times what it is the failure is something that has happened. It doesn't mean that the individual is a failure. So you have to step outside of the event rather than focus on the individual who made that event happen. You can't go back and fix it. Obviously, it already happened. So let's look at the event. Either you make sure it doesn't happen again, or what can we do to fix it, improve it, rather than focus on the person. Oh my God, I can't believe I screwed up. No, the deal fell apart. Okay, how do we make it come back? How do we find a better deal? How do we find another deal? It's not one of those where you're trying to focus too much on the person and what the person did. So that's where I feel like if we keep each other on track with that, the business continues to grow.
I love that. Zig Ziglar used to famously say that failure is an event, not a person. Failure is a place, not a person. Yeah. So perfect, because it's true. This didn't work out the way we wanted to, but we're going to do this to do better next time. And oftentimes, and I've learned this from my own coaching experiences, that oftentimes failures are our best opportunity to display customer service. It's the best opportunity when we're interacting with the public to say, you know what, we didn't get it right. But haven't you been to a restaurant, you've operated a restaurant, so you know this, haven't you been to a restaurant where the food doesn't come out great, or your drink order's taken too long, or you never got dessert and you ordered it? And what they do, though, in that moment where something doesn't go right is far more important than the issue, as it were.
Right. This is where it's I'm sorry the chef didn't make this right for you. I'm sorry the dish didn't come out right. How can we fix the dish? So you're not blaming the person, you're blaming the event, which can be fixed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The customer doesn't have an issue with the person who had this mistake happen is also not going to be in a position where I can't do it right the next time because I failed. It's the event failed. I can do better next time. I think that's where it helps. And the restaurant, for what it was, that was one big lesson we learned.
Oh my gosh, yes.
With every customer, every client that walked into that place, we learned a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Well, I just finished reading a book by Brian Buffini. I just mentioned him a few minutes ago. Brian immigrated to America from Ireland, and he wrote this book after decades of success now called The Immigrant Edge. And the subline to it, or the subtitle, I should say, is How to Make It Big in America. So being an immigrant, I'd love to just ask, what's some of the things that you've learned about being an immigrant? Because in Brian's book, he talks about there's an abnormally disproportionate amount of immigrants that become wild success and become millionaires than the folks that just live in this country, because really Americans take things for granted that you came to America to become this success, and you believed in the American dream. So what does it mean for you to be an immigrant that then also has succeeded?
Okay, so I always say that, like I always say that I look around and there are so many people who take things for granted. Even the smallest things, like being in an air-conditioned space. I mean, I know that's something very small. Whether you're in your car or in your office or in your home, but something just like that, having that comfort is huge. You know, it helps with everything. It helps with your lifestyle. When I moved here, I worked every single day, right? Like worked day and night. I still remember I had open houses sometimes twice on Saturday, 2 times on Sunday. We worked every hour we could work, right? Just to make it happen. And of course, we were not in a position where I could even get my real estate license. So my goal was, okay, work hard, let's buy a home, the American dream, let's buy a house, right? So that was the first year. It was like working nonstop, not taking things for granted. Like this was great. The lifestyle here is great because of course, from where I come from, we were 4 of us, 4 kids. We all slept in one room because there was only air conditioning in one room, you know? So the whole idea over here of kids having their own room, I'm like, wow, really? Okay, that's fantastic. Just not taking anything for granted like that, you know, the clean roads, the not having to deal with pollution, you know, everything contributes to you being able to work better and work harder. And one thing that's great about this country is if you work hard, you will get rewarded. You see it, you know, it's not like you have to wait 25 years to see it. You actually see it, and that motivates you to work harder. And nothing is impossible here, I feel. Especially in India, I know it's not possible for somebody to just come in and be able to buy a house and be able to buy investment properties. It does not happen. This country gives you that opportunity to grow and live your dream. So that's my experience. He moved here when he was 17.
Yeah, I moved after high school, so I've been here longer than she has. And I got my undergrad degree here, worked for several years, and got married to Karishma. And my experience here was also one of those where it is new, it is very different. Even though I had watched TV shows from here growing up in India, living it was very different. But once you're in it, it is something where the entire system, the legal system,
Yes.
the government system, the local infrastructure, everything was so easy, so simple to kind of slip in and not have to stress about that.
Yeah.
You know, something as basic as clean water, to never have to
Yes.
think about it. You know, growing up, we could not drink water from a faucet.
Yep.
You always had to make sure that you had bottled water.
Yes.
Little things like this just slow things down. And so here, like not falling sick as much. Okay, you want to take a class at whatever age, like my age when I went to business school, I was 32, so 32 or 33. And it was one of those where India, that would not have happened. But here,
Yeah.
nobody blinked. And it was
Yeah.
okay because I was ready to learn. The school was ready. Everybody that I went to class with was perfectly accepting.
Yes.
There was nobody like, what are you doing at this age going back to school?
Right.
So every
And
step that you can do
everyone
is
treats
good.
you with respect,
Right.
right? It doesn't matter whether you're a millionaire or you have just $1. Everybody treats you with respect, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that you speak about things that people take for granted and
Right.
don't take advantage of in
Right.
America. Buffini talks about one thing, which is kind of a wild concept to think about. He's like, the U.S. Postal Service is one of the most efficient. Now, there's other postal services within America that have become overnight and other things, but you send a piece of mail in another country, it may never get there, or it gets there 3 weeks, 4 weeks later. And just some of the things that we really take for granted of dropping something in, it gets there in a couple of days. It's just amazing. So what I'd love to close with is my favorite question. It's a question I ask almost everybody that I interview is this concept of dear younger me. Vic, you had mentioned that you got here when you were a teenager. This idea of you're maybe giving advice to yourself now that you've lived some life and you know more. What advice would you give to the younger version of yourself, that 22-year-old maybe that's just starting off in the business world after college? So what advice would you give Vic? And then Karishma, will go to you next.
Sure. I think the biggest thing that I feel like when I was younger that I didn't pay attention to was long-term goals. I just didn't see past a couple of years of my life back then. So I was living in the moment, loving my job, loving my friends, hanging out, not really planning, not really taking advantage of the unique position that I was in, which was construction, remodeling, building homes, being tied to the Houston real estate market. That was a fantastic opportunity for me to leverage my knowledge and skills in the local market to be able to invest for myself, to be able to grow irrespective of my day job, as a builder or as a project manager, to be able to grow that, to be able to plan long-term and say, hey, this piece of land is cheap today. It's a fantastic location. Can I invest in this now, pull together some capital from friends and family and do it? All of these things didn't really hit me almost till I met her. It was one of those where I was very, living footloose and fancy free. I'm young, I'm single, and I never realized that I'm getting older.
It's amazing how all of a sudden you become goal-oriented when you meet the significant other. You're like, I want to make sure that I don't mess this up. So all of a sudden you became goal-oriented. Karishma, how about you? What was that advice that you wish you knew when you were 22?
Okay, so I have two. When it comes to real estate, my advice to somebody who's new in real estate is you don't have to be good at everything. You don't have to be good at open houses and make expired calls and door knocking and farming. You pick what you're good at and stick to that. And it's okay. And that will feed your business. But just be good at it. Be comfortable in what you're doing. Because that's something I wish, because I knew I was good at open houses. I knew I was good at farming. But then I started trying all these things because people make expired calls. You get so much business, or for sale by owners. And then you just overwhelm yourself. And I stopped doing everything because I was just so overwhelmed. So one piece of advice for real estate, for new realtors, I would say, find what you're good at, find what you enjoy, and just stick to it. In life, my younger self, I wish I knew that I was not in control of everything. I felt like I was in control of everything, and everything was either it's my success or my failure, and I'm responsible for this. And I thought I was the person, I was in control. But life happens, and you have to just adapt and move on. And don't feel like, oh, everything's happening because of you.
I love that advice from both of you because I think it's so apropos. And I've been in so many situations throughout my younger life where I really wish that I wasn't trying to do everything and trying to blend every single thing, really honing in on what I'm most successful or what I'm most apt to succeed in, I think is really, really important. And then being goal oriented, I think goals stretch you. Goals give you life, and especially if they're a little scary, goals really stretch you into areas that you need to strive and move and improve into. So love the advice. I think that it's amazing. I say this every interview. It's amazing how quickly the time goes when I'm speaking with top producers like yourselves. So cool to connect with you, me being in Colorado and you being in Texas. And it was wonderful to get to spend some time with you in Denver just earlier this year during our mastermind and our reunion. So I just appreciate both of you. Vic, it was great to meet you for the first time. And Karishma, you and I have shared several conference calls prior to meetings. So just great to see you again, literally on the screen here, and talk to you today about life and success. And I've been learning alongside of the audience. I truly believe that there's several things that I'm working on implementing because of what you're talking about. The Immigrant Edge is a great book for anybody out there to read, especially if you're American, hearing from the perspective of those that have sacrificed by leaving their homeland and coming to America to really have a better life and live a better life, that American dream. That's going to be my gift to you. I'm going to get both of you a copy of The Immigrant Edge by Brian Buffini. And I typically only endorse books that I've read. And so I think that you'll both enjoy it. And you'll probably say, yep, check, check, check. That all makes sense to me. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. For those of you listening on iTunes, a 5-star review if you loved this podcast gives us all life, gives the guests life, as well as our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, and myself. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe in addition to subscribing to iTunes. And as I love to say for all of my guests, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.